and we certainly invite wonderful industry guest speakers. This week we have Russ Taylor from Global Wood Business and Market Consultants out of Vancouver, British Columbia. Russ is going to talk to us a little bit about what's up with China, which ought to be a very interesting discussion. Before we get started, yesterday we participated, Mike Wisniewski and Russ, as a matter of fact, you can see both their faces on the screen, participated yesterday in a timber and technology conference, which was fascinating. It's an international logistics, shipping, and containerization kind of a conference. And one of the sessions on there was B2B digital digitization of the supply chain. And one of the interesting topics that came up was, is digital going to replace or is it harming relationships in the industry? And this is something that we're starting to feel more and more as a topic. And so I was really struck by the discussion itself and what some of the responses were. And essentially, I'm going to walk you through a couple of slides that'll capture kind of what this reply was. The industry and professional relationships are born by providing value first, of course, and then they're reinforced over time with repetition, trust, and time, right? And then, but the actual exchange of product information, the actual digitization of price, quantity, and availability is much better served in a digital environment. It's secure, it's instant, it's generic, and it's just a better forum for the actual data itself. This allows more time itself to be spent on the value-added conversations and the intelligence and that further relationship building. You know, communication will always remain in the existing professional and social venues. So this venue that we were on yesterday, the Timber and Technology Conference, all the associations that drive our industry, all the golf events, all the trade shows, all that stuff continues to evolve in terms of building relationships. Interestingly enough, yesterday, when this call was happening, we got hit on our website by someone that was attending the conference. I fielded the inbound lead while the conference was online, talked to this gentleman. He was a lifelong salesperson for Weyerhaeuser. We had a long discussion about the digital platform, and all of this happened live while he was watching this conference and went through other digital channels to reach me, and then I followed up with him. And so it was a fascinating case study. We were talking, he and I were talking about the relationship building portion of our industry. He had just watched Mike Wisniewski and was commenting on Mike's comments about relationships. And then here we were building a new relationship together instantly. It was really quite a fascinating case study. So I think it's important to realize everybody on this call, we all seem to know each other through past experiences or relationships. And then there's many people on here that I've just met for the first time over these last number of months with Materials Exchange. So the digital platform certainly, you know, broadens our exposure. So with that, I just wanted to, I thought that was a noteworthy concept because we're going to be running into it more and more as we talk about digital in a relationship industry. So before typically I'll turn this over to Ashley to talk about market updates, and I still will. But for now, I just wanted to talk about the kind of the trade of the week. And I'm going to talk about Encore Building Products, which just bought its first load yesterday. And Dennis, are you on board? Can I ask you to unmute your mic for a sec?
Good morning. How's everybody?
Hey, good morning. Good to see you. So Dennis, yesterday, well, describe a little bit kind of your experience with us. You onboarded here maybe a week ago. We went through the process of getting your financials loaded. You even had a kind of a wait and see attitude about that. And then yesterday you sent me all that stuff and you started to bid in the live environment. Why don't you just kind of walk us through a little bit how that happened?
Right. Well, we've been watching it for a few days without actually actively participating. And I watched a couple of trades pop up and some offers pop up that I would have loved to have grabbed. And then I watched as the numbers changed up and down, and I realized there was a transaction in the works. And that sort of spurred us on to go ahead and take the final plunge and upload the financial information. Yesterday we were looking for OSB, and so I created a material list with some OSB on it, and somebody somewhere, I don't know who or where, and don't really care who or where, to be honest. He had 7/16 OSB, I needed 7/16 OSB. He threw a price up, and if he's on this call now, you know, then I'm going to say something I shouldn't. I saw the price, and I was probably willing to buy at that price. Being my first transaction, I wanted to get one under our belt so we could see what was happening, and I was prepared to pay his offering price. But a little voice in the back of my head said, So I went $10 lower just to see how the platform worked. So I put up an offer $10 under. His offer disappeared, and I thought, oh, shoots, I lost it. And it came back. He dropped his price $5. So we were now in the middle. So in between us, I've been watching the screen. Nothing had happened for a few minutes before he dropped his offer. Too much information here. I went to the bathroom, checked my phone, and saw that he'd come back with a counter. I did wash my hands before I ran back to my desk and clicked the mouse, matched the offer, and the bells and whistles went off, and we had our first trade. So within 3 days, from what I understand it, we will have a truckload of OSB on its way to Northwest Arkansas.
Thank you for that. That's a classic story. Now, I watched some of this from behind the scenes. We can watch both sides of the trading platform. And I resisted every urge to get on the phone and coach or do any kind of involvement in the transaction, and just watched it. There was one time I sent Dennis a note, but it was really fun to watch and kind of a fascinating thing to watch it roll out. So I applaud you for that. Mike always talks about, and we talk a lot about, when people first experience their first Uber ride, and they think, they're going to have that cab, that taxi cab experience. And yet they watch this Uber drive towards their neighborhood on their phone, and they see it's 2 miles away, and they go, well, this is kind of unique. And then this Uber shows up, and it's a clean, beautiful car. And when the ride is over, he doesn't have to have that weird, how much do I tip him conversation, or even do I have to pay him? It all just happens. And he goes, well, that was a pretty good experience. And then he does it again. And then he does it next time he's in Orlando. And he starts to say to himself, this is a better way of doing things. So it's getting over that first hurdle. It's getting over that first transaction. And Dennis, we applaud you for that and look forward to many more to come. So thank you for that. All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We have a new announcement today about a new system enhancement that's coming down the pike. This is really, really big. So many of you, you're all very familiar with our platform. In order to populate your watch list, we have you enter in lots of different items. I call it creating a butterfly net so that you can see all the offers flowing through. And in order to see all the Euro Premium, you've got to put in Euro Premium Prompt, of course. There's some redundancy in there. And sometimes if you don't have just the right mix of everything you're looking for on your watch list, you'll miss something. You can actually have holes in that butterfly net. And I've had many people say, and we've all heard it on the MX side, just show me what's offered, please. I just like to see what's offered and let me browse. I see you with your hands up there, Judy. That's great. So here we are. So we're happy to announce something that we'll be introducing here in the next week and a half here or so. I coin it point and shoot. It's really called Active Market. And really what it is we're going to be able to show you everything that's being listed on the marketplace itself. And then from there, you have the ability to select the items you want or select all if you'd like. And that's what I call the point step. That's selecting and identifying what it is you want. From there, we say you can shoot. In other words, you can paste all of these into your various different watch lists to see your landed pricing. One of the huge advantages, one of the biggest time savers, is going to be selecting your multiple locations that you can point and shoot, if you would, or paste these market prices onto your various locations. So Riverhead, Matthews, Hancock, all the multiple location yards that have 11, 15 yards on the system that have essentially built one or two browsers, one or two locations to do their viewing. Now they can point and shoot all of that, those live market pricing onto all of their locations and see landing costs to all of their locations. Those of you that are multifamily project guys or companies that have multifamily projects around the company, now you can paste in the various different market offerings that are available. So this is just a huge, huge next step for the next version of our platform. And I just wanted to introduce for a second, I also wanted to make sure you understand that this works in reverse. So not only on the buy side are you looking at items that you're pasting into your watch list, on the selling side, you can also see what buyers are looking for when they're making bids in the marketplace too. So it's a two-way street on this functionality. Very powerful stuff. So I just wanted to introduce Joe Campagna. Joe is on the line. Joe, why don't you talk a little bit about this, why you did it, why we did it, and what we can look forward to moving forward.
Thanks very much, Paul. As you mentioned, we continually search for ways to improve the system, and we hear all of your comments, and we take them very seriously, and we log them, and everything gets prioritized. And as we move toward our next kind of iteration or version of the user interface, we decided to make active markets an interim solution. As Paul said, we typically hear it's hard to find products on the system. So this is exactly what active does. It pushes the information to you rather than having you search for it. So you will see I'm writing up a document right now. It will be distributed the beginning to middle of next week. We're definitely going to get this into production by next weekend. There's a chance we can get it in sooner. I'll be emailing a PDF out to everyone that shows a user guide step by step as to how it works. And you'll be able to see product, again, pushed to your screen, pushed to your locations. You can select and deselect, as Paul mentioned, as you like. If you don't want to see OSB or you don't want to see Euro, you can deselect them. And they are added to your watch lists. And it's something that constantly is running in the background. It's literally has a 5-minute refresh on it. So if you want to, you could sit there and ping it all day long. Our suggestion, and it's in the documentation, is that you do it at least 3 or 4 times a day. Give it a half hour or so after the market opens. Make sure you do it kind of before lunch, after lunch, and a half hour or so to go in the trading day. So we think it's a very good interim solution for us. We hear what you had to say. We very much appreciate every recommendation and comment that we get. And we want you to know that we take it seriously. And this is something that we think is going to be really good for the user community.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Paul.
And just as a reminder, so we have training on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays of every week. I run that training. We'll start to be covering point and shoot functionality on there. So if you haven't been on the system, if you're looking for a refresh, jump on board anytime midweek, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 2 o'clock Eastern. All right, so last week we talked about another huge announcement. We've got a lot going on at Materials Exchange right now. We talked about our first ever in-person event. We're calling it the Frontiers Conference, where change agents come to meet. And this is going to be in Chicago, May 19 through 21. We've got a terrific lineup of speakers. And since we last talked, we added a host to the mix. His name is Ted Albrecht. He is a color commentator for Northwestern University, an NBC analyst, former player for Chicago Bears back in the early 80s. And he's going to be our host for the event. And then, of course, we've changed the location. Actually, we're going to be at the Chicago Athletic Association, which is going to be a fabulous venue. It's right in the heart of downtown. You'll be overlooking the lake. It's going to be a stunning, stunning venue. And as we mentioned before, we've got a terrific lineup of speakers. None of these are lumber speakers. They're all out of industry speakers. And these are people that have been change agents in their particular space. Dustin Cohn from Goldman Sachs. We've got Craig Christensen, who probably is the closest thing to a lumber dealer in terms of dealing with a distributed, if you would, commodity kind of traditional product in pork. Is very large on the national scene in pork distribution. He'll be involved. We've got Cameron Mahoney from SAP, who does strategic implementations, and his whole job is essentially introducing change to new clients when they're trying to adapt to a new software platform. We've got Nick Falcone, who's a video on demand platform manager and manages the Peacock digital streaming product for NBC, and he'll be sharing his insights there. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with Josh Deeth, who's the CEO and founder of Revolution Brewing Company. The schedule of events on Wednesday afternoon, we're going to have a series of pre-conference, if you would, sessions, roundtables and discussion kinds of events. So that's kind of our soft arrival. Many people might be arriving late in the afternoon or so. We'll have a reception. We'll have dinner on your own, a networking dinner on your own on Wednesday night, but the full-blown conference starts on Thursday morning. We'll have seminars all day. We'll have a networking lunch, a reception, and a group event tour and dinner at Revolution Brewing. And then finally, on Friday, it's going to be more of an in-house meeting where we will review. Joe Campagna will be leading discussions on the MX platform roadmap, what you can expect from the platform literally for years to come. We're going to do our first ever SmartMarket live presentation. If you can think of College Game Day on ESPN, we hope to have that environment, all with our big foam fingers and mascot heads we'll have going. And then we'll have a user forum where we're asking users to provide more user feedback on what they've heard in these seminars over the last couple of days and what their experience has been on the platform. We'll adjourn by noon, and folks can either stay the weekend and enjoy Chicago, or they can take off.
Hey, Paul,
yes, sir.
If I could just chime in. This is not a conference that you're going to get preached to obviously by industry guys. The conversation during the conference is all going to be about the experience of people outside the industry, like Paul said, change agents. And we're not going to tell you how to think. We're going to just throw the information out there and then let the attendees as a group understand some of the challenges and successes these people had and how we could apply that to our industry. So I've just been to too many conferences where the speakers get up and they tell you what they want you to hear. This isn't going to be like that. It's going to be an intimate setting, and there's going to be a lot of discussion midway through presentations. You can raise your hand and ask a question in the middle of it. It's going to be great. I can't wait to hear what these speakers have to say.
All you guys should be going, for us Canadians who can't, because I would love to go to Chicago right now, for the record. So,
well,
have a beer for me.
We are unfortunately limited in Chicago by the restrictions here. If by some chance things change, our goal is to open it up and get as many people here as possible. But we're hoping that this is just the stepping stone for many more conferences like this to come, where we're bringing value outside of just the digital market.
All right, very good. Thank you, Michael. Ashley, you there? Talk a little bit about market.
Hey, Paul, sorry about that. I just had to pull this up. Gotcha. Well, look you guys covered a lot of it. So there's the market is up. That's the forecast right now. I think it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people talk about how crazy the market is and the more it gets on CNBC, heck, it's becoming pretty sexy to be in the lumber side now. It wasn't for 20 years, but my gosh, we're part of the CNBC lunch hour and everything right now. So that's probably going to keep prices up for a bit. So KPIs, key product or key performance indicators that we look at here. One of them is how many bids, how many people are looking to buy, offers, how many people are looking to sell. When we first had the platform up and running and the marketplace up and running, it was traditional. People would get all their lists in the morning and they would send them out to people just like they used to fax them back in the day. And, everybody waited and we're price takers. The great thing about our platform is one of the KPIs that we see now is there's more bids going back in every day. So that means there's a change of habit, and that's good. That's what we want. Now, the other KPI we look at is how close are those bids to those asks, to those sell. And we've noticed that shrinking. What that tells us is the people recognize value. Not only do they change their habits, but they want to transact on the platform. Similar to what Paul just highlighted on the platform for this week. People no longer have to be price takers. They can be price creators. Just like with that OSB load, in the back of his mind, he thought, hey, I'm going to wait on this. That little voice is usually right. And it worked, right? Everybody's happy. The seller got the price they wanted. The buyer got the price they wanted. And more importantly, they got the inventory they wanted. One thing we also noticed this week, people are starting to circle back. What I mean by that is people that we talked to months ago and said, we aren't interested, this will never be successful. The famous one, you're just like other people that have tried this, which I always chuckle at because we're not, we're much better. They started signing back up, which is great, and are getting on. Our goal is 1,000 loads in the next few months, and we think that we'll be able to reach that. We'll let you know when we do. But I won't take up any more time. I wanted to say thank you to everybody for using the platform so far. Tell other people about it, because word of mouth spreads quickly and we could really help support from our users getting new people on. Back to you, Paul.
All right, very good. And thanks, Chris Bouchard, for your challenge to the audience about buying some beautiful large decking. Make your bids here this afternoon or this morning. And also, just as a reminder that the other announcement we made last week when our guest was Matt Lehman is that we're going to be producing a new series called Lumber Live, which is Ashley and Matt will be reviewing what's going on live in the industry each Thursday afternoon at lunchtime. And also we'll be applying to how to essentially engage the digital marketplace to take advantage of some of the trends that you're seeing. So that starts next week on Thursday at 12:30 in the afternoon. So tune in for that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who's going to introduce our guest and move forward with our interview this morning.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. I am really, really excited about the next person who we have to talk with you. It's important when you're analyzing a market to look beyond what's just in front of you. And I remember about 10 years ago, the China market was throwing curveballs into the US market that were never seen before. What most people don't recognize is the true scale of China, the number of people there, the size of that economy, and truly their insatiable appetite for fiber, which basically for lumber. So Russ Taylor is going to talk to us. Russ is hands down the #1 expert on the Chinese lumber market. He lived in China. He lives and breathes the trade happening to and from. So I would like you all to put a good ear to hear what he has to say. Understand that it is not going to affect you directly today, but there's a good chance that what happens in China, like the butterfly that flaps his wings on the other side of the world, that ripple effect will come to the United States and to our market. So listen to what Russ has to say, and I think you'll be able to formulate a good opinion on what we could be seeing in the next 12 to 24 months. So Russ, good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mike.
Let's start out real quick and say, who is Russ Taylor, and why should I listen to you?
Absolutely. And I'm just going to make one quick comment before I do that. I was going to say, I was thinking this morning, why would people be interested in China? But things are changing there. And I think I see a bit of a sea change going on where China is going to be more of a price taker, unlike the last 10 years. So that's what I'll be talking about later in the presentation. So anyways, getting back to who I am. So I've been around for a while. I've been in the industry my whole time, and started off as a forester. Worked for Interfor for 8 years as a mill sales manager, and then started my consulting career back in 1988. 88, yes, and then started my own company in 1992. So in terms of consulting, we've kind of moved from looking at the U.S. market and moving into the Southern Hemisphere, which we spent the 1990s in the Southern Hemisphere looking at those countries, and then in 2000 made the decision to start looking at Europe, China, and Russia. So we became very international over the last 20 years, and now sort of I have a global perspective on all the major supplying regions and all the major consuming regions. So I'm probably one of the few, if not the only person that has that big perspective. And so I get called on often to talk about some of these markets nobody else can, including China and Russia and so forth. But and I've been doing a lot of different through 25 years running International Wood Markets Group, did a lot of publications, and a lot of analysis, special reports, conferences as well, global conferences. And so that's kind of how my network has expanded, and I've gained a lot of perspectives over the years. So that's a quick story.
Perfect. All right. So look, in North America, we send a pile of wood to a job site and they build a house out of that wood. They're putting studs up and wall panels. That's not the way things are done in China. Give us a quick overview. How is wood used? Obviously construction, and then other uses that we just don't even think about.
Yeah, exactly. And I know at one point, BC was the largest lumber supplier to China, and we had various politicians in BC really proud that we've made these great inroads into China. But the truth be known, it was all mountain pine beetle low grade wood, and there the number 3 and the number 4, they're all used primarily in concrete forming, so helping to build the concrete condos that they build and buildings, and then after 3 or 4 uses, it's thrown away. Basically, it's burnt or it's recycled, but it has a very basic value. So that was the big that's kind of where a lot of the low grade wood goes, and probably that's the biggest segment. Probably 60% of the wood is used in concrete forming, and then it's used in all the interior of the home. So the floor, the doors, the windows, the cabinets, the furniture, etc. Some of the basic framing, furring strips to nail drywall to, that sort of thing. So that's where the real value added is, and that's where the industry is more and more growing in China for its own domestic consumption. Export opportunities has been cut back with duties on exports to the U.S. and other countries, so it's been much more limited. But they build wood frame homes, but it's like it's a tiny volume, and it's more special homes more than anything else. That segment is growing, but it's way less than 1% of the 7 to 10 million housing starts they have in China.
Now, they would prefer, when you talk about a furring strip, of course, they would prefer to start out with the big raw material and cut their own furring strips. So they're really not buying any value added products. They want as close to the raw material as possible, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Chinese prefer logs, because they have thousands of sawmills all over China, little sawmills, 6 to 7 people working in a sawmill, 2 bandsaws. And it's the lowest cost, highest yield mill in the world, so they can take a log all the way from North America, cut it, make products, and ship it back to North America, because they're very, very efficient.
That's amazing. I remember I was talking with a Chinese importer of logs, and he was describing the port they had over there. And it was a brand new port that the government said, we need to boost business in this area. They built a port, and they set up essentially about 500 or something spots for small sawmills, like you're saying, to come in. And it essentially created a sawmilling industry right next to the port. And they bring the logs in, and these 5-man shops just start sawing this stuff up.
Yep. And that's how it works in China. Build it and they will come, and they build ports, and then they build up the infrastructure and rent out the sawing sites, and they develop an industry. It's incredible. But they do want logs, because a log is one inventory item, whereas if you have to bring in lumber, it's multiple species, sizes, lengths, grades, and they're always out of the size in demand, and they got to wait 4 to 8 weeks to get it back. So they prefer the log, and the logs are starting to get tight.
So let's talk about the flow of logs. Obviously, we know North American, the easiest spot to get logs out of the North America is the Pacific Northwest and Canada. But they also get logs from New Zealand, correct? And then the interesting wrinkle is previously they were getting a lot of logs from Soviet Union or Russia, and that's going to change, right?
Yeah, this is the big sea change that's going on now, where the whole world needed to sell logs and lumber to China back after the housing market collapse and the global financial crisis in 2009. And so we kept doing that at very low prices. And over time, the supply lines have tightened, and all of a sudden, and now we've got some more developments going on. So this year, the big change in China is the Australian log ban into China. It's really political, but they say it's pests. So 10% of Russia's log supply has disappeared right now. Or China's log supply has disappeared. So that's very interesting, and we don't know when that's coming back. And next year, Russia is only 10%. It used to be the dominant supplier with like 60%, but over time with log export taxes, the current log export tax, shipping logs from Russia to China is 80%. For the bulk of the wood. So obviously that's killing the export business. And next year, Putin has announced a log export ban. So there'll be theoretically zero logs or very few logs coming from Russia if this goes through. So that's another 10% of the log supply disrupted. And now the Chinese are trying to find other log suppliers, like from North America. Well, log prices here are going up and log prices in China are going up slowly. So there's less interest in selling to China at current prices. The biggest log supplier is New Zealand, radiated pine logs. And they do have lots of logs, and they have it's surplus logs to the industry. So that volume will keep coming. And the second largest supplier is the European spruce bark beetle. That's 3 years ago, Europe shipped almost no logs to China, and now they're neck and neck with New Zealand with about a 32% share of the log import. So that's all a salvage program. And in about 3 to 4 years, that volume is going to start to wind down as well, because of the beetles now have start to run their course, and the volumes will start to decrease. So again, Russia's second, third, and fourth largest suppliers are under siege right now, and the rest of the world is relatively small. And so all of a sudden, as I look ahead, I see this change happening where, if Russia or if China wants logs, they're going to have to start to pay the more of the global market price than they have. And that'll be, and that's what's happening right now. They're having to jack up their buying prices dramatically, and they're not used to having to kind of, pay what the seller wants. And that's a big change right now.
So let's talk about the second derivative effect of that. They start paying up for logs. I know the U.S. South is a potential source of logs for them. What would be the secondary effect of that to the U.S. consumer or the North American consumers?
Exactly. I didn't touch on the U.S. South, but there is surplus logs there, and there are log exports, and they were going pretty strong until the China-U.S. war kicked in and tariffs were in place. Those have gone away now. So log exports from the South are going up, but they are constrained by capacity, port capacity, containers. It's all mainly going by containers. So that's a bottleneck right now, but that could increase. But what I see going on is if China can't get logs, or they're paying more and more for logs, they're going to start looking more at lumber, and probably that lumber price is going to have to go up too. And so what China's going to do, if the prices in China are able to stay high, and of course everything cycles back and forth. So, but if that's going to sort of, I think, raise what I call the floor price in many markets, because if the China prices stay and hold or keep going up, then domestic prices will be affected as well, because now the sellers in the U.S. can say, well, hey, we're not getting we used to have a discount selling to China, and they were prepared to get a small discount. Well, if that discount's very large right now, if that comes down, more volume can go to China. That means the volume in North America tightens up, and guess what? That's going to put more tension on prices. So this is a big picture story that it's going to flow in fits and starts. It won't happen like the U.S. market does, but over the next few years, if we do continue with strong demand in the U.S. and in Europe and in all the other markets that have the same thing going on with their housing markets, then all of a sudden we've got global tension, which we've never seen before. 2007 was probably the last time we really saw global tension, 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in there. But this is the first time all markets are strong, and China's desperate for product.
So I got two questions. Do you have a rough idea of what is the price that they're paying in China today for lumber or logs? And what could we, if we monitor that price a little bit, what would we have to expect the price to move up to for it to start affecting our markets here?
Well, it's so the price is one thing. It's really the volume then is the issue. I mean, so the U.S. and Canada are now small log suppliers to China. I mean, the volumes have gone down because, you know, we've got higher demand and higher prices here. And same with lumber. Lumber volumes from US and Canada have been plunging because the returns are better in North America and the demand is there. So the volume part of it is really what is not going to drive the US market yet. It's when the volumes start to flow back. When I see the volume starting to increase to China from North America, logs or lumber, that means the prices are more satisfactory to sellers, and that means that the volumes to China could increase, and that's when the tension will occur. So we're still quite a ways away from that point.
How do we see that as a guy sitting in Chicago or in Arkansas? How do you see volumes increase?
Well, that's the problem. It's I mean, I track that information every month. There's monthly data, but that information doesn't get distributed too widely, and it's more for the international traders that track that. So it's part of that mystery of China. It's not like you don't see that in Random Lengths, for example, if you're looking for easy information. So they touch on it occasionally, but it's sort of one of those things that are just harder to find. So
we could tap into your resource, shameless plug, of course. That's interesting. I think that's a really good point of watching that flow. Now let's flip the coin. If Russia, who was shipping all these logs down to China, if they're no longer doing that because they can't export logs and they have to export a value-added product, do you see the product coming out of Russia turning into a North American product? I mean, are they going to ship 2x4 2 and better out of Russia to the United States?
Interesting question. Yes. Well, first of all, a lot of people don't know this because unless you travel in places like China and Russia, which I've done for about 20 years now, for example, the sawmill industry in Russia, about half of the supply that goes from Russia to China is Chinese mills that saw this export tax. You know, 80% it's gone up over time. They've moved their little portable mills across the border and have set up shop there, and they cut the logs in Russia to bypass the export tax and export the lumber to China. Now, part of the 2022 plan is also to put a tax on green lumber, or maybe ultimately even a ban on green lumber exports from Russia to China. And so that's another factor that's going to drive the sawmilling industry to putting in kilns and doing more value added. So the other half of the story is the Russian mills. There are some state-of-the-art Russian mills that I've seen. You know, you see the same type of mill you'd see in Europe, and it's all around European technology. You can see in Russia, and those mills are the ones that already have the kilns. They already have the planers. Those are the ones that could direct their production into dimension lumber. And it wouldn't so much be the ones, I mean, Siberia is in the middle and you're not going to see that happen, I don't think. The Far East is a more underdeveloped region, and you're probably not going to see it from there. But the high price market is the East Coast US. So Western Russia has some of those mills that could very easily, and maybe they're doing it now, I don't know, but they're certainly, the volumes from Russia are very small right now to the US. I know there's a lot of boards that have been produced over the years, but they could very easily produce, at these kind of prices, they could very easily produce dimension lumber at the mills I visited in Western Russia. So, and there's a handful of them, but they also get very good returns selling into Europe or into Japan. So it's not the U.S. it's the price cycle right now in the U.S. would definitely get their attention, but long term, I think they will push more of their wood, say, into Europe, and it's the Europeans that'll push the wood into the U.S. market because they have a better freight advantage and better logistics than the Russians do. But the Russians could be a player in the U.S. market, but I would think it's going to be the Europeans that are the big ones.
Let's shift gears for just a second and talk about a very painful topic, panels. I do know that they make plywood in China. Do you see those wood panels coming back to the United States? Or what do you see in the panel market area?
Panels, I don't track that quite as much, but I mean, they do have some duties with some of these combi panels. They've been kind of, the plywood panels in particular. So they've been sort of kicked out of that market or been taxed. I mean, they do produce OSB in China. I went to the latest and greatest mill about 4 years ago. But so more for internal consumption is really what the Chinese are doing there. And maybe it's more the Russians that have OSB mills, for example. And they export to Europe, but again, with the prices, they could also export to the U.S. market. Maybe that's the story. But in China, the panels are, the panel exports have been dropping over the years, and partly because of all the different anti-dumping and so forth regulations have come in, and they don't produce softwood plywood except for these combi plywood with softwood on the outside and hardwood on the inside, but they've not been a big producer of softwood plywood. They typically make plywood for concrete forming, which is going to be hardwood with overlays and that sort of thing. Okay.
Are there any other products that you see being made in China that we'll see here on our shores?
Well, back when we first went to China, I mean, back in the early 2000s, it was all buy from China. It was buying everything that was a finished product. It was moldings, it was doors, it was flooring, it was just all these value-added products. And then slowly, when the U.S. market went into recession in 2007, 8, 9, then the prices went down. That all stopped, and all of a sudden, Russia's log export tax started to go up, and the Chinese couldn't get logs. So then China started buying logs and then lumber from everybody. And then over the years, there's been more of these, anti-dumping route regulations put on various products. Moldings was the last one. China got hit with moldings, I believe, and other things. So the value-added products coming in from China are getting more and more limited is one of the issues.
I mean, obviously, given the current price escalation and limitation on product, there's going to be desire to source the products anywhere. Do you see China being able to meet that demand? And if so, what's their ramp up time to start producing those products they made in the early 2000s?
Yeah, it doesn't take long for the Chinese to switch gears. I can tell you that. They're lightning fast. But, I know that in some of the data I track, they were, in terms of softwood lumber imports, they were one of the top 10 producers, and last month they dropped off the list. So that those others are increasing as they remain stable. But
let me understand. They were in the top 10 of importers to the U.S.
Yes, U.S. imports.
And they've since dropped off.
Oh, they're number 11. In other words, their volumes are relatively flat, or other countries are increasing, like from Europe or the Southern Hemisphere. Those countries are increasing at a faster pace. So, yes. So we're not seeing as much of the Chinese impact in terms of North America imports. It's more about the raw material imports to China from various world suppliers. That's more of the trend.
Okay. All right, so let's wrap up with probably my favorite question. What does Russ Taylor see or think that no one else is thinking or seeing right now that is going to be a major effect to our industry in the next 6 months, 24 months, 5 years? Like what do you got your finger on the pulse of that you don't think anyone else is watching?
Well, the one thing I've been working on, and it's a bit of a longer term thing rather than a short-term thing. I mean, right now there's so many short-term things going on. It's one of many things could happen, but but looking at China, I've done a long-term outlook on the Chinese demand and consumption and available supply. And as I mentioned earlier, the suppliers to China are dropping in terms of logs, and the rest of the world is consuming more lumber at higher prices. So when I do my kind of longer term forecasts, and in fact, this is what. So back in 2009, 2010, I did a similar analysis, and that became the starting of this so-called super cycle forecast that I made that I've lived to regret for many years because it never happened for many years.
Russ, it just takes time. It's here.
Exactly. You got to be patient, but I could see it was the supply was going to constrain itself, and when demand took off, you would see a crazy pricing cycle. And so, I thought it would happen in the mid part of the last decade, but it happened, and it happened in 18 briefly, and it's happening now. But it was inevitable when you look at the supply side, because that's what I look at too. I look at the supply side. Most of the analysts out there and so forth, they don't look at the supply side. They don't travel. They don't see what's going on. And so I could see this coming, but it was a matter of when. And so now I almost see a second wave. It's kind of almost like the virus. There's a second wave coming. I mean, but it's to do with China, and China's demand is growing, and its available raw materials are shrinking. Like I talked about, Australia is out right now. When it comes back, they're going to be more diversified. They don't want to have all their eggs in one basket. Russia's going to get knocked out next year, potentially. Europe's going to get knocked out in 2025. Uruguay is a supplier to China. They have no more pine trees after about 2027. They're all harvested. New Zealand's which is the biggest supplier, they have a bit of a bubble coming where they won't be able to grow their harvest. They don't have any more trees in the ground, and that's going to get allocated out. And BC and US West Coast are going to be kind of more stable, and then the US South is probably the last basket while there's less wood available, and that's going to be relatively small. And so somewhere around 2025, I can't find any more logs for China under my current assumptions. First of all, there's no other big suppliers out there that can come into the game. So that's a long ways out. But I see this tension with China moving over the next few years in various cycles. And that's going to be the tug when China has to start to pay that higher price again. That tug's going to be sort of heard in other supplying countries as well. And when you get to 2030, after that, and then the European volumes, I missed that European volumes fall off after 2025 with their beetlewood. And so somewhere around 2030, everything starts to decline. I can't find any more global log supply that's going to be readily available for China. And now that's looking way out into a lot of, the Netherlands, but nevertheless, it is a cycle that's going on. And China will have to then buy more lumber to replace the logs. And they're going to have to be paying global lumber prices or close to it to get that extra volume to replace the logs. And so that's the thing I'm watching. And I think we're seeing it right now. Like the prices in China right now have just jumped since the fall. And we've never seen this. China came out of their Chinese New Year holiday, and the whole world had changed with prices and availability. And they had to come back in, and their prices are up 50% since November, and that's incredible. And some of the quotes the Chinese are getting from some of probably the Canadian mills is, here's the U.S. price equivalent. You want our volume? Here it is. And they've never heard that. I mean, never. And so they're in a bit of shock right now about what's going on with global market prices, and that's the China factor is going to come in, over the next 3 or 4 years in various ways and shapes. And that's the thing that I'm watching that's going to be a bit of a game changer. So,
all right, you know what? We're getting short on time. We got 3 questions, so I want to do a little rapid fire with them. We'll stick to logs first. So they're asking, is the U.S. the only market that ships out raw logs? And I'm understanding there's almost every country will ship raw logs to China.
Yeah.
Outside of regulation.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. is a small supplier to China, like I mentioned, New Zealand, Europe, Russia uh, are the big suppliers, and then, but many countries, a lot of the Southern Hemisphere countries, some of the European countries all ship small volumes, but the big volumes are the top 3 or 4 countries. You know, Europe, New Zealand, Russia, and who am I missing? Australia. Yeah.
And we anticipate, if what happens, what you anticipate happening, the rest of the world's having less supply, U.S. South will become a little more dominant player.
Yeah, exactly. And as more mills get built in the U.S. South, and maybe more logs go export, even some lumber going export, that'll put more tension on the log supply, and that'll finally elevate the stumpage rates to the landowners, and that'll also sort of push push the prices up as they are in the Pacific Northwest. The log and lumber prices are so closely aligned that there's no wiggle room for the mills, or little wiggle room. That'll, in 5 years, maybe longer, will be there in the U.S. South.
Grade stamps. What's the challenge of a Chinese mill getting a grade stamp that we can use in the United States? Or any foreign mill. How about that? Any foreign mill you see getting certified to meet our ridiculous building codes?
Yeah, well, it's tough because I don't think China will be. I mean, they could, but they probably re-export lumber that they've already got to more than anything else. But the plantation pine countries really are the other source of lumber outside of Europe, and they're not. They could get grade stamps. Argentina, I believe, has a grade stamp, or had a grade stamp, but I don't think they've ever used it. So because the plantation pine in the Southern Hemisphere is just slower growing and not as dense, and doesn't meet the regulations, or only they run it through the mill and half of it makes the grade and half of it's fall down. Then what do you do with the fall down? So I don't, outside of Europe, which is the boreal forest across Canada, Europe, and Russia, that's where the grade stamps could come from. So maybe the question is more is grade stamp from Russia. They have the fiber that can make dimension lumber. That would be or another European country maybe.
Is getting a grade stamp a 1 week, a 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, 12-month process? What is it?
Not sure, but it's not slow. You have to get somebody over there, and they got to test the wood in the lab and everything else. I don't think it's a slow process as far as I know.
Okay. Sorry, let's just kind of wrap up. I'm going to tell you what I think you said, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. First, I'm going to coin a phrase for you, the super duper cycle. You see, maybe 5 years from now, the stars are aligning with global supply, that we could see like the next leg up.
Oh, I don't want to get caught with any more of these tags again. And then where is it? But I think it'll be a different kind of a cycle. It'll be kind of more of a global cycle. And I think we're already into the early innings of that already, and maybe even further along. But I think it's going to be a kind of an eventual process that in about 4 to 5 years we could see this a cycle where it's also the global trade that's gotten really tight, not just domestic mills. And so I think it could be exactly as you say, some next wave of cycles, that'll impact markets.
And you're seeing the Chinese buyers coming to a bit of a critical come to Jesus moment where, oh, wow, prices are higher and I'm going to have to pay up.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a backstop for pricing right now.
Exactly. And it's slow, but the Chinese buyers that I've been talking to, and I talked to a few of them, on a regular basis, and they're in a little bit of shock right now about what's going on with global prices. They can't believe it's moved that quickly, and they have to now fall in line for volume, and they have to accept prices that they've never thought they'd be paying. So that's okay. Definitely a trend.
CLT. Do you see China making CLT?
They're making CLT. There's a couple of smaller plants, as far as I know, that are dabbling in that. And the Chinese government has a green initiative. They want to have a green industry, and they are pushing timber structures, and there's a lot of interest in that. So whether they make it or whether they import it, it could be both. So I think that's an opportunity in China as well.
All right, so a lot to think about. Thank you, Russ. This was fantastic. If anybody wants to get in touch with Russ, it's RussTaylorConsulting.com, right?
It's RussTaylor Global.com.
RussTaylorGlobal.com.
All one word.
This was fantastic. And I think the influence of China on our markets is underappreciated. And it's not easy to get the data, of course. So you're a phenomenal resource. We really appreciate it. I got one last question. Russ, on a digital market, do you see in the next 5 years a digital market where the user interface for the Chinese buyer could be in Mandarin and the user interface for the seller, North America, would be English, Spanish coming out of South America, whatever language coming out of Russia or Europe?
Well, absolutely. I mean, yesterday on the conference that we were both on, the host, which is a sort of a trading platform for logistics, I guess you might say it is. They have it in 5 languages, including Mandarin. So that's starting to happen, and I think from yesterday as well, I see more and more of this, electronic exchanges being part of the drill, because like Chinese will need to get more raw material, and companies will want to sell to China, and no one's going to know how to do it. How do you do it? You do it through a platform like you have, which is going to become, I think, more of a way of selling and buying wood globally, which is the next stage. So I see all these pieces starting to integrate after this conference we had yesterday. There's a lot more happening on the digital platform than I ever realized.
Fantastic. All right, Russ, thank you so much. Absolutely amazing talk. This was a real treat. Like I said, you can get in touch with Russ on through his website. But thanks a lot, and hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, Mike.
Very good. Thanks, you guys, very much. It was very informative and fascinating. So we appreciate that very much. So with that, Russ, we want to thank you again for your insights. It was a wonderful talk. And just a reminder again to everybody that this week will be our first ever Lumber Live digital trading session that will run on Thursday afternoon at 12:30 Eastern with Ashley and Matt Lehman. And with that, thank you all.
That's going to be streamed through YouTube and LinkedIn Live. So it's not going to be a Zoom call. This is going to be a stream. Please have a little bit of understanding while we work the kinks out of how this is going to go, but we anticipate that this is going to be a phenomenal 30 minutes of informative market talk.
Mike, are you going to send out an invite?
We are learning how to do that right now. It's going to we'll promote it, Jude. And I think it's just, you go to YouTube Live or you go to LinkedIn Live, but we'll train everybody up. And I'm sure we'll stumble a little bit at first, but over time, it's going to be fantastic.
Thank you.
Everybody have a great weekend. Thanks for coming.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Great show.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you all very much.